Welcome to the Standing Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities meeting of Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. This meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, City of Vancouver electronic meetings. As such, committee members and the public may participate in person or by electronic means. If a committee member is attending by electronic means and loses connection during the voting process, team members are available to get you back online quickly while voting process is suspended. Team members' contact information has been circulated to you. Video of the committee members speaking, presentations, and vote results will be projected on the live stream when available. Committee members are reminded that in accordance with the Section 1413 of the Procedure Bylaw, members must enable their video to confirm quorum. In case of an emergency where we need to evacuate the building, I would like to direct your attention to the exits. There are 2 exits beyond the glass doors and to the left. If the glass doors are obstructed, please direct your attention to the 4 exits in this chamber. Please use the stairs and do not use the elevator. I would also like to highlight that there is a defibrillator located at the end of the hallway outside of the council chamber. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver's team members who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. City Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Sim. Councillor Carr. Councillor Kirby Young appears to be
Present.
absent. Oh,
Present.
are you? I see you on the WebEx. Thank you. Councillor Dominato. She is here, but not in the chamber at the moment. Councillor Bly. Councillor Boyle. Councillor Fry. Councillor Montague.
Present.
Councillor Claassen is in the chair. Councillor Meisner. And Councillor Jo.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Chair Claassen.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's the plan for the day, which I would also like to mention is Pink Shirt Day. And I'm glad to see we've got the team members here all wearing their pink shirts. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be posted on X @VanCityClerk. I also want to note the City of Vancouver's long-standing commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including the utmost respect for all genders. I remind council that when addressing speakers and the city's team members, we will avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first and last name, role, or title. Today we have matters adopted on consent, 6 reports, and 2 council member motions. We will break at noon for lunch and continue to deal with the remainder of the agenda at 1 p.m. If needed, recess at 5 p.m. for a dinner break, and then reconvene at 6 p.m. to complete the agenda. So committee will now consider matters adopted on consent. We have reports 2 to 6 on the consent agenda for council's consideration. We will hold report 1 to hear from speakers. Council may adopt recommendations for reports 2 to 6 on consent. Does any member wish to hold any of the items? I'm just going to pull up my hold any of the items for debate or questions for to team members. Not seeing anybody on the queue. Okay, very good. Okay, moved by Councillor Dominato and seconded by Councillor Carr. Oh, yes, of course. Okay. And does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest on the consent items? Seeing no hands. Okay, we have reports 1. Reports, 1 second here. Reports 2, the quarterly capital budget adjustments and closeouts. Report 3, the 2024 budget for Britannia Community Services Center Society. Report 4, contract award for food and beverage broadline distributor for the Vancouver Board of Parks and Recreation. Report 5, contract award for pre-qualification of professional engineering services consultants. And report 6, contract award for pre-qualification of building management services consultants. Would someone like to, so we've already had a mover, a seconder, so all those in favor of approving these on consent, say yay. Okay, that passes unanimously with everybody here, and I believe Councillor Kirby-Yung is on WebEx. Very good. All right. So, just looking here. All right, so we're going to look at now report 1. Single-use item bylaws and report back on CUP policies. Does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest on this item? Right, seeing none. All right, this item has a presentation, so you'll now hear from staff.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jonathan McDermott. I am the Director of Solid Waste Management in Engineering Services. I'm really pleased to be here today. I want to also introduce my colleague, our expert, Monica Kosmak, who is the Senior Project Manager for Single-Use Items and Extended Producer Responsibility. Monica is going to run through the presentation, but I just wanted to kick this off with a few words. We're really excited to bring these 3 key recommendations forward to Council today. This is a follow-up from last February when Council directed staff to report back with alternative CUP policies and resolved to work with provincial and federal counterparts on comprehensive strategies for single-use items. And so each of the 3 recommendations support this direction. The first recommendation relates to relinquishing the city's single-use item bylaws to the federal and provincial governments. This is to help resolve a conflict and overlap with those regulations and the city's bylaw, but also this harmonized approach across BC and Canada is something that we have always advocated for and is really actually incredible to see. To know that our actions help contribute towards this is extra special for us as a team. So going forward, we'll continue to play a strong role to help amplify federal and provincial regulations through our outreach and education programs, and look for opportunities to help support transition to away from single-use items. But we're going to rely on others to do the enforcement piece. The second recommendation relates to continuing to advocate for the federal regulation to align with the city's current standard of accessibility for people who rely on flexible plastic straws. This actually is a really important issue. We've heard that loud and clear throughout our engagement and from the city's Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee. The federal regulations are excellent, but respectfully, just don't go far enough to address accessibility. The third and final recommendation relates to alternative CUP policies and requests that the province work with us and other stakeholders to develop consistent regulations and approaches that are best fit for BC. Over the past year, we've done a lot of research into options and what's happening across the world, and sharing this work with the province is one way that we can show our commitment to working together on solutions rather than just doing it our own. The report appendices contains a lot of information on alternative CUP policies, but this presentation will touch on just a few of those. So all of the recommendations are based on the idea of leveraging partnerships, encouraging consistent approaches, and continuing to show leadership on zero waste, still with single-use items, but also as we shift our work to focus on other big waste streams like food waste and construction and demolition waste. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Monica for her presentation.
Thank you, John. Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to share my presentation here. Is the screen sharing? There we go. Okay, thank you very much. So as John mentioned, it's not moving. The screen appears to be frozen. Is it moving on your end, Bonnie? Okay, I'll try again. Okay. There we go. Thank you for your patience. So as John mentioned, I'll provide a high-level overview of the 3 recommendations in the report, and I'll provide the context, the discussion, and the rationale for each recommendation as I go through them. The first recommendation is for Council to relinquish the regulation of single-use items from the federal to provincial governments. The City of Vancouver currently has regulations for 4 types of single-use items. We have a ban on foam cups and foam takeout containers, a ban on plastic and compostable plastic straws with accessibility provisions, a by request rule that customers must ask for single-use, any type of single-use utensil, and a ban on plastic shopping bags with minimum fees of 25 cents and $2 on paper and new reusable shopping bags. As John mentioned, recognizing that the city can't solve the problem of single-use and plastic pollution alone, council and staff have encouraged the provincial and federal governments to introduce regulations to provide consistency across BC and Canada. On December 20th of last year, the federal and provincial governments began phasing in their new regulations. The federal regulations ban 6 types of single-use plastic items. The new BC regulations ban almost all the same types of items as the federal regulations and introduces new additional restrictions. These regulations overlap with and extend beyond the city's existing single-use item bylaws. The province has produced this handout to show how the provincial regulations are being phased in alongside the federal regulations. As of December 20th, the box on the left shows in the red circles that the federal government has banned plastic utensils, plastic shopping bags, food serviceware or takeout cups and containers made from hard-to-recycle plastics, including foam, and plastic straws and plastic and compostable plastic straws. On the right, the box shows that the province has also introduced additional by-request regulations, meaning that customers must ask for wooden utensils, drink lids and sleeves, paper straws, condiment packages like ketchup and soy sauce packets, napkins and wet wipes, and garnishes like plastic sushi grass and drink umbrellas. These overlap with the city's regulations. Here, the box on the left shows that as of June 20th of this year, the federal regulations will ban flexible plastic straws attached to drink boxes and pouches and plastic ring carriers. On July 15th, the province will move to ban plastic shopping bags and require 25-cent and $2 minimum fees on paper and reusable shopping bags. The province will also ban food serviceware made from hard-to-recycle plastics, again, foam, and biodegradable plastic or PVDC film wrap, as well as all oxo-degradable plastics. And in 2028, the province will ban PVC film wrap, shown in the box on the right, as well as foam meat trays. 2 recent court rulings provide context for staff's recommendation. First, on November 16th of last year, court declared the legal basis for the federal single-use plastic regulations as invalid and unlawful. In December of last year, the federal government advised city staff that the Government of Canada is appealing the ruling and the federal regulations remain in force. Second, in February of this year, the BC Court of Appeal made a ruling regarding the city's business regulation powers. As a result, the city may no longer have jurisdiction to enact single-use item bylaws because of the extensive overlap with these single-use items being subject to extensive provincial and federal regulations. In terms of the legal implications for Recommendation A, the federal and provincial governments have enacted substantially similar provisions for single-use items. These regulations should be considered paramount to the city's bylaws and will replace the city's business regulations for single-use items. Also, as a result of the BC Court of Appeal ruling regarding the city's business regulation powers, the city may no longer have jurisdiction to enact single-use item bylaws. And this is because of the extensive provincial and federal regulations that subject single-use items. And so rescinding the city's single-use item bylaws avoids this issue and is recommended. So staff recommend that council relinquish the regulation of single-use items to the federal and provincial governments because it avoids overlapping and conflicting with the new federal and provincial regulations for single-use items. It simplifies compliance for businesses, and it reduces confusion for residents. And as John mentioned, this is a significant achievement for the city, as the city's been a leader in developing comprehensive single-use regulations in the country and the province, and has advocated for federal and provincial regulations that align with and extend beyond the city's single-use item bylaws. Next, Recommendation B is to enhance the accessibility of the federal plastic straw ban. The city's plastic straw ban prioritizes accessibility, inclusion, and equity. To the best of staff's knowledge, it sets the highest accessibility standard amongst plastic straw bans in the world. It was developed with input from persons with disabilities who rely on flexible plastic straws to eat and drink. And it was endorsed formally by the city's Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee. Although the federal regulation includes some limited exceptions intended to ensure access to flexible plastic straws, it does prohibit key accessibility provisions in the city's plastic straw bylaw. In this table, the green check marks show that the city's bylaw requires food vendors to give out accessible straws when requested for accessibility. These are flexible plastic straws, individually wrapped in paper. Retailers can display packages of plastic straws, and plastic straws can be attached to beverage containers under the city bylaw. However, these are prohibited under the federal regulations. The federal plastic straw regulations also conflict with the city's accessibility strategy. The Accessible British Columbia Act requires local governments to adopt accessibility plans. In July 2022, Council adopted the city's first accessibility strategy, shown here on the right, and Focus Area 6 of the strategy for governance and services has a goal to make sure there is fair access to municipal programs and services in the City of Vancouver. However, by prohibiting the city from giving out flexible plastic straws, the federal regulation impedes the city's ability to provide barrier-free food and beverage services. So staff recommend that council request that the mayor write to the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada to respectfully request that the federal government amend the federal plastic straw regulations to include the accessibility provisions currently in the city's plastic straw bylaw. Enhancing the accessibility of the federal plastic straw ban ensures barrier-free access and inclusiveness and equity for Canadians who rely on flexible plastic straws to drink and eat. It was recommended in a unanimous motion passed by the city's Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee, and it supports the city's accessibility strategy and enables the city to provide accessible food and beverage services at our facilities. This is also consistent with the resolution that Council passed in June of last year for the UBCM 2023 convention, and it's intended to support the federal government's excellent work to address plastic pollution. Our third and final recommendation for Council is to respectfully request that the province develop circular cup regulations. On February 15th, 2023, Council approved a member's motion that directed staff to report back with policy recommendations and alternative pathways for single-use beverage cups, including recycling options and initiatives. Council also resolved to work with the provincial and federal counterparts to coordinate action on single-use items. In Vibrant Vancouver, Council strategic priorities for 2023 to 2026, Council includes an action to support a circular economy, including the reuse and recycling of materials. The first part of staff's scope of work was to understand the environmental impacts of single-use plastic and reusable cups. And in 2021, the United Nations Environment Programme published a report that analyzed 10 peer-reviewed life cycle assessment studies for single-use and reusable cups. The report found that reusable cups generally have lower climate and other environmental impacts than single-use plastic cups. And all single-use plastic cups, regardless of the material they're made from, whether it's fossil-based plastic, bioplastic, or paper lined with any type of plastic, single-use plastic cups have a similar level of environmental impacts to each other. Next, staff did an extensive jurisdiction scan. We reviewed cup regulations that have been adopted or proposed in over 50 jurisdictions around the world, including in Canada, the US, Mexico, Europe, and Asia. Staff found that jurisdictions are using over 40 types of regulatory requirements, which we grouped into 7 different types of categories, including targets, reduction, reuse, recycling, economic instruments, litter abatement, and other, including composting. And many jurisdictions have regulations across multiple of these categories, taking a systems approach to address single-use plastic cups. For example, this slide shows Canadian cities with multiple policy interventions. In 2023, Edmonton, Banff, Mascouche, and Terrebonne all banned single-use cups for dine-in, require reusable cups for dine-in, and require food vendors to accept customers' reusable cups. Banff, Mascouche, and Terrebonne also apply the same rules to containers. Victoria City Council approved in principle a bylaw that aligns with Banff, Mascouche, and Terrebonne. It's with the province now for approval. And Mascouche and Terrebonne have also proposed a 10-cent half tax, half fee on single-use plastic cups. Businesses would be required to charge the 10 cents, remit 5 cents to the local government, and keep the remaining 5 cents. This slide shows how quick service restaurants and a food court in Terrebonne, Quebec, have introduced reusable dishes for dine-in to comply with the regulations. The Netherlands stands out as an example with a very comprehensive set of regulations. The goal of their regulation is to make reusable cups and containers the norm. Their target is to reduce single-use plastic cups by 40% by 2026 from 2023. The Netherlands started phasing in their regulations on the takeaway and delivery side. Since July 1st of last year, food vendors must offer reusable cup and container systems for takeaway and delivery, accept customers' refillable cups and containers, and charge for any single-use plastic cups and containers provided. These takeaway and delivery rules apply to the Netherlands' hospitality sector, grocers, retailers, and kiosks, and open events. Then, starting January 1st of this year, the Netherlands introduced regulations for on-site consumption or dine-in. Single-use plastic cups and containers are banned for dine-in, for eating in, and for drinking. Reusable dishes must be provided for dine-in. And there's a limited exception to set up high-quality recycling programs for single-use cups and containers made from a type of plastic that can be recycled back into food packaging. This option must achieve very high recycling rates and be registered with the national government. The on-site consumption rules apply to the hospitality and retail sectors, closed events, sports clubs and associations, and offices, companies, and institutions. Finally, the Netherlands has also implemented regulations to address litter from single-use plastic cups, along with 9 other designated single-use plastic items. First, as shown on the left, single-use plastic cups must be labeled with a logo to show it's made of plastic. Second, starting in 2024, extended producer responsibility requires producers to be responsible for covering local government costs associated with litter, including reimbursing local governments for the cost of managing cups and other designated items in the public waste collection systems and litter, and raising awareness to prevent litter. Our third and final example is South Korea. The left side of the slide shows that South Korea has started phasing in deposits on single-use plastic cups starting in 2022. The right side of the slide shows that Seoul also plans to ban single-use plastics in parks. Most cup regulations have been in place for less than 3 years, so performance data isn't available yet to assess the effectiveness or efficiency of these policies. However, we've made these preliminary observations. First, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Policies must be tailored to the local context. Second, the most comprehensive regulations drive avoidance, reduction, reuse, recycling, and litter abatement. Third, circular cup systems are generally interpreted as reusable cups with limited exceptions for high-quality recycling programs for single-use plastic cups. Fourth, extended producer responsibility is applied beyond recycling to reuse and litter abatement. And finally, nimble regulations include clauses and commitments to review and adjust policies, for example, within 3 to 5 years of adoption. The next question staff asked was, how can this research be applied within BC's policy context? Currently, under the recycling regulation, the province of BC holds producers responsible for recycling residential single-use plastic cups. As a result, Recycle BC has accepted single-use plastic cups in their residential Blue Box program since 2014. Second, as discussed under Recommendation A, starting this July, the province will ban single-use plastic cups made from hard-to-recycle plastics as well as hard-to-compost plastics. But single-use plastic cups made from recyclable plastic or paper-lined with any type of plastic will still be allowed. Now the province is developing a policy to improve the circularity of commercial packaging waste. The province is doing this under its 5-year action plan for extended producer responsibility for the years 2021 to 2026. The left arrow in this timeline shows the province has started collecting data and doing research to understand the ICI packaging waste stream and how it is managed. ICI stands for industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors. The right arrow shows the next phase of work, which is to analyze the data and engage stakeholders to evaluate policy options for ICI packaging. The round star on the right shows the province intends to identify a policy approach in 2025. The province's work plan for commercial packaging represents an opportunity for the city to encourage the province to develop a circular cup regulation across BC as part of its work to start phasing in regulations for commercial packaging. Ideally, such a policy would be informed by life cycle analysis to determine the mix of policies that could achieve the best environmental outcomes for BC. And in British Columbia, we're very fortunate the province has world-leading regulations for extended producer responsibility and single-use plastic waste prevention that could be extended to address cup packaging. Respectfully requesting that the province develop circular cup regulations for BC in consultation with local governments and other stakeholders supports the province's work to identify a policy approach to make commercial packaging more circular. It recognizes that such a policy would be best if it were informed by life cycle assessments done at the provincial level. It builds on the province's existing regulations for single-use items, plastics, and extended producer responsibility, and it aligns with Council's direction to coordinate action with senior governments, prioritize support for the circular economy, and focus existing resources on core services. The city can share research undertaken to complete this report in order to support the province in this work. So in summary, this report brings forward 3 recommendations for Council's consideration. A, to relinquish single-use item regulations from the city to the federal and provincial governments. B, to respectfully request that the federal government enhance the accessibility of the federal plastic straw ban. And C, to respectfully request the province develop circular cup regulations for British Columbia. That concludes the presentation. We'd be happy to take questions.
Thanks very
Thank you.
much. Committee members, you have up to 5 minutes to ask any questions of team members. And I see we have another people on the queue, so I will advance. Councillor Carr.
Thanks very much. and for the comprehensive presentation. That was great. My first question has to do with really the overall goal, which is to reduce waste into items to the landfill, et cetera. Do you have are we tracking the statistics around how our measures to date have reduced waste to the landfill? And yeah.
Yeah, so overall, so we're actually planning on coming back to council later on in Q2 with a 5-year report back on Zero Waste 2040, which was a commitment when we brought that report forward. I can tell you that we are not on track to meet our goals. We've seen about so the data is typically about 2 years behind. We rely heavily on Metro Vancouver's data, so it's somewhere between 1 and 2 years behind. So it's not current, but we've seen probably about a 36% reduction from 2008 baseline levels. And so our initial target was under Greenest City 2020 was a 50% reduction. We've seen a reduction to about 36%. We saw a really big reduction in the first, I think, 7 or 8 years, and a part of that was our switch in collection frequency from green bin biweekly to weekly. And then in the last 6 to 7 years, it's certainly slowed down. So there are more things that just recognizing that a lot of this is related to behavior, and behavior does not happen in a short period. And so we're continuing to work on a lot of different types of programs to try to move the dial. And one of the things that we're looking at for this year and in the coming years is to try to tackle some of our big pieces, which are around food waste and construction and demolition waste. So we don't have a comprehensive plan on that yet, but we are turning our heads to some of those big ticket items now.
Those are good avenues to pursue for sure. And in terms of the new regs that have come in from the provincial and federal jurisdictions, do you think that those are going to move the dial in terms of reducing the waste to landfill?
I mean, that's the hope. That's the intent. A lot of the stuff is really hard to measure, but I mean, that's the intent. I mean, to be able to put our finger on exactly what we, forecast in terms of a reduction as related to the federal and provincial regulations would be really, really hard for us to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question on those new regs. There's a statement in the report that says that there are some of the new federal provincial regulations that actually go beyond what we have been doing. What are those measures that go beyond?
Great question. That's provided in the Appendix G, but it's a lot of the by request regulations for the food service accessories, banning more different types of hard to recycle plastics, black carbon plastics like black trays. Those are hard to recycle, different types of materials there. So the federal regulation also bans plastic ring carriers and those types of things.
Right. I'm sure that we're going to get asked this by consumers, but there's a lot of plastic in the grocery fresh produce sections of grocery stores, and so are those intended to be phased out as well, like the little bags that people use to throw their, whatever fresh produce into?
I think so. They're not currently covered by the regulations, but the Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment has a zero plastic waste strategy, and it targets that type of plastic packaging. There's also the Canada Plastic Pact, and the United Nations is working on a plastic pollution treaty. So I think we will start seeing those inroads. And I think in particular, the provinces work around a strategy for commercial packaging waste is also going to provide an opportunity to cover those materials. So I think we would see it as the next frontier. It's like software.
Yeah. Okay, step by step, we'll get there, right? Hopefully sooner rather than later. And last question, how fast do you think the federal, provincial governments could work? You must be talking to them about the accessibility issue. And so, what is your sense of the timeline on making sure that there is no gap for those who really need the flexible straws?
Well, unfortunately, there already is a gap because that regulation took effect December 20th.
Right.
I mean, they have done engagement. The federal, to their credit, they met with members of our Persons with Disabilities Advisory committee to have a demonstration on the importance of flexible plastic straws. So they have that understanding. I can't speak for how long things would take in the federal government, but I would assume that there would be some kind of approval process. But because they've done the work on the regulation and they've done so much engagement, my hope is that it could be a fairly quick change, provided that that the federal government was in agreement with the city's position.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Fry.
Thanks, Chair. First off, huge thanks, John, to your entire team. Monica Kosmak, you've done such amazing work. Andrew McKenzie, Chris Underwood before you left to go to Metro. I really appreciate the work that this team has done for years on this file and the wealth of knowledge you guys bring to the table. Big fan. And this is really exciting. A lot of the news, the stuff that's coming out of ECCC and the Plastics Pact, it's really exciting. But I just want to maybe just have you explain the extent to which a lot of what we think is recycled doesn't really get recycled at all. And like, so for instance, with a lot of the poly-coated cups, my understanding is most of them end up going to the incinerator. They don't actually, even when they go to Blue Box, they don't necessarily go to some magic recycling depot that turns them into paper and something else.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer this. So for the cups that are collected through the Blue Box program, through Recycle BC under the regulation, those are recycled. They're sent to a facility, they're mixed in with other cartons, and because it's a low quantity relative to the cartons, they actually can get recycled. The issue with recycling cups is that there's no plastic lining on the outside, and so the ink gets saturated in the fiber, and if you recycle like a red cup, it can make pink toilet paper. So when there's less volume, it can get recycled, and under the provincial regulation, there's a requirement for it to be audited by a third-party auditor and published in an annual report. So we have high confidence in that recycling. The challenge is the material that's collected through the commercial sector. There isn't that same level of accountability. And also when you have that concentration of the cup stream, there is for sure a challenge with marketing that material. And I think we have heard, council has heard from other speakers here about materials collected through the Binners project demonstration where that gets sent to the incinerator. And that is part of the challenge for sure, that there needs to be more work on improving the recyclability and compostability of cups and ideally reducing those cups.
Which perfectly segues into why we need reuse. And how as a city, you know, notwithstanding, I mean, I appreciate that there's an ask to advocate to the province for more circularity. How are we enabling circularity with reusables, like washing, that kind of thing? What can we better do to facilitate that kind of work? Is it through permitting and bylaws to allow facilities that have washing? Are we looking at solutions that we might be able to scale as a city, as a province?
I think we can do work to promote education. We do promote the 3 service providers that provide reusables for takeaway. The city partners with Return It as well to offer on-street collection bins for reusable containers and recycling cups, which is actually groundbreaking. And I think, just working with the province is funding the expansion of cup washing facilities. And then, and I think that what we're looking for is a consistent approach across the province, because it's really difficult, I think, for individual cities to tackle this issue alone.
So I know that we've discontinued the pilot for zero waste. We were going to do a zero waste innovation center, I think, down at Manitoba Yards that may not be happening. Is that still?
Yeah, that is still under discussion.
Okay, so how can we better facilitate micro zero waste solutions like in neighborhoods? So like the Return It kind of facilities where you can...
Yeah, I mean, I think we always have our ears to the ground to see if there's an opportunity for us to support on any initiative, whether that's supporting On-Corp Return It with their initiatives, and they're, doing a lot of great work, whether it's supporting Binners Project with those types of initiatives. We're always open to supporting where it makes sense to do so, and where we have a clear line towards ensuring their success. And so I think we don't have anything specific in terms of working on zoning or issues like that. But we'll just continue to be open to working with other partners on initiatives.
Can I add to that? And this might sound really boring and policy wonky, because that's what I do, but I have seen over the years, like the when local governments build the case for EPR programs or for province-wide policies, it started when I was back at Metro Vancouver and developing the case for electronics recycling programs, EPR programs, and just putting forward that data, putting forward the research as in this report, and sharing it with the province, and then other municipalities also and support that vision as well, and everybody working together towards that. It really does make a change. It is how we have the EPR programs for packaging, e-waste, et cetera. For that program, we started with
Great.
computers and
Pause you
moved
there.
on.
We're just running over time here, so we're going to advance now to Councillor Boyle.
Well, I'm happy to hear the end of that delightfully nerdy answer.
Oh, you want me to finish? Okay. So for the electronics, we have these EPR programs for electronics, for the packaging, for the hazardous waste. Because local governments, Metro Vancouver, City of Vancouver, have put forward, and in fact, new ones starting, mattresses, sharps, other materials where staff here and the city and Metro Vancouver have put forward data and the argument for the need for these programs. And so they have evolved over time. And the electronics one started with TVs and monitors, and now it covers everything with a battery and a cord.
Great. Okay, thank you. My other question is about the accessibility piece and bendable straws in particular. What hope do you have that us sending a respectfully worded letter to the federal government is going to see a change, and on what timeline on that front?
Yeah. So, we can only advocate at this point, and we've advocated at the staff level. Council has already advocated through UBCM. Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee has advocated. And so I think all we can do at this point is to continue to advocate. It ultimately is up to the federal government to work towards a solution. We have met with senior staff at the federal table and chief accessibility officer at the federal level. Everybody understands. I can't tell you. I can't give you an answer as to whether.
Understanding how
Yeah.
we solved these problems. Is there more that we can do locally in terms of like a Greenest City grant that helps provide bendable straws to businesses, or or just communication that encourages businesses to have these available, even though we can't require them until such a time as they're required, like helping those businesses and their employees understand what that need is so that there's more of a chance they're available?
So we did that through when we implemented the plastic straw ban, and our toolkit actually does have that material. We do have window decals and posters, and we've sent sample plastic straws to businesses as well. The challenge is that as of December 20th last year, when the federal ban took effect, they can't give them out anymore. So we would be encouraging businesses to be in breach of the regulation if we were to try to promote it at this time. So it's really important to try to change the regulation at the federal level.
Who is responsible for enforcing that?
The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Environment and Climate Change Canada.
Okay, who are unlikely probably to come into a coffee shop and enforce a local coffee shop giving out bendable straws? Like, I totally understand the point. I also just think it sounds like it's going to be a while and it's a pretty significant issue. So is there some way we can communicate this need? Just trying to think about how we support our own residents for whom these are very important. A rule that seems unlikely to be heavily enforced and penalized. I'm not asking for illegal activity from the city.
We will take that away
Creative thinking.
and see if there are opportunities ensuring that we are not breaking any federal regulations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the report. As you're probably aware, the Metro Zero Waste Committee is in the midst of updating, as is required by the province, the zero waste plan, which is the big piece of work for this term. And so I have a question, and I'm kind of zeroing in on the cups and recommendation C. A lot of the committee conversation has been around the challenge in those cups being accepted in residential waste, but not in the commercial stream. And so I wonder if you can speak to whether that's part of what's articulated in recommendation C, because it identifies working with other stakeholders in terms of, just looking at the language here, to identify a policy approach for the circularity. And so I'm just looking to see if that's explicitly anticipated or covered there.
So if I understand the question, sorry, that the difference between the residential and the commercial
That
sector?
you can go to a coffee shop, get a cup of coffee, you can go home and put it in your bin in your residence, but you cannot put it in a commercial bin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that would possibly be part of it. There are regulations in Europe and in California that require bins to be placed on site, and then you would just need the accountability. And I think through the provincial EPR regulations, where they would have the annual reports, it would provide that accountability. But I think if council wanted to make that clearer, that's an option, an opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's my question, is that one of my understanding now, just to be explicit on the question, is it's currently prohibited from being accepted in the commercial waste stream, which seems to be a distinction between I can put it in my green bin at home, but I cannot put it in a rubbish bin on the street.
Yeah. And this is really at the heart of the recommendation, right? Is that there's already a system in place for residential blue box for cups.
Right.
But there's nothing in place on the ICI, the commercial institution industrial sector. And so this work that the province and the recommendation requests that the province, as part of their new look at ICI sector, is to actually integrate that into their new policy. So it's exactly tackling the issue that you're speaking to.
Okay, so that's covered in the resolution. It wouldn't require any additional direction from council. Okay, and extended producer responsibility is also inherently covered in that resolution. That doesn't need to be articulated either.
Yeah, I mean,
Those pieces are linked.
that is, it's whatever the solution that comes up with. It could be covered under an EPR program, it could be under, but it's part of the exercise that we're asking that the
Right.
province
So you're
go through.
taking a
is to-
broad approach. It can be EPR, it can be
Yeah.
waste management, it can be the sort of in terms of innovation on production, it can be all those things. That's
Yes,
the
their
intention.
although it was in their 5-year action plan for extended producer responsibility, they use broad language to improve the circularity of commercial packaging in there. And I think that's because the ICI waste stream is really complex compared to the residential waste stream. And so my sense is that they left their options open. And so I think we want EPR as on the table, but there's some things that might be more individual producer responsibility as opposed to the collective approach. So I think we're wanting that broad approach.
Okay, that's really helpful. The other question that comes up and that the Metro Zero Waste Committee has really flagged as a piece of work is access to multifamily being more challenging versus the city having direct access to single family as our city continues to densify. And so if you think that single family homes are a bit more in our rear view and everybody or the majority of folks will be living in multifamily. So can you comment on how this report might intersect with that?
So the residential EPR program for packaging covers multifamily buildings as well. So recycle building, although I can use the words blue box, it also includes the blue cart, the blue bins at the recycling, at the multifamily buildings as well. So that's already covered.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Carbillon. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks so much for the thorough update. I appreciate the questions raised by Councillor Boyle around the issue around the straw ban and the flexibility that's needed there and some of the advocacy. So I won't go into that, but I did want to ask, in the context of the reusable dishes, we had this conversation last term when we were talking about a cup fee. And I think I gave you the example of going into a local coffee shop where every single person was staying in and they were all drinking from paper cups. And when I asked for a reusable mug, they're like, "Oh, we don't have any here." And I'm curious, we had talked about more education and awareness and opportunities to sort of really highlight that when you go into a retailer, that this is an offering. And I'm just curious, is that part of the suite of things we're still looking at, is how we to help sort of drive that change? And so could you speak to that? kind of broadly?
Yes, so we have that education information as part of our current toolkit, and I think, to your point, pending council's decision on the bylaws, our plan would be to communicate any bylaw changes to businesses, and I think that would be a great opportunity to remind them of the toolkit resources that we have. They're available in 6 languages. They can be downloaded or they can be ordered in print copies. So I think there's that. There's also outreach work that we have a zero waste team that does outreach, so more on the not the business education side, but the consumer education side. So there's still things that we can do there to promote reuse and reduction of single-use cups.
Okay, that's great. And I presume that with this, harmonization that we're basically undertaking, given federal provincial regulations, that there will be sort of strong communications to local businesses, because I think it can be very consuming. And I know I've been to different retailers. There's different messages about what they're charging on bags, what they're not. Is that part of our planning?
Yes, so the province actually has really good communication materials. Similar, they developed a toolkit, and so again, I think there's an opportunity for the city to amplify what the province is doing, both on social and in our letters to businesses, if we were to explain any kind of transition in the regulation. But we can just, again, point to the new regulations and where they can go for information and the education materials that they can use.
Okay, great. And then harkening back to last term, there was a pilot, and I don't know what came of it, that was, there's a couple different pilots. One was around coffee cups, and I remember, I think they had a recycling at the Vancouver Public Library, and I think that's where they did the launch. I'm just curious, what happened with that? And then there was some other reuse models that were being undertaken with different retailers. Can you just speak to that and what the status is of those pilots? I'm not sure.
Sure. So, I think the pilot that you're referring to is the Return It pilot with brand owners, partnering with, I think it's 3 large brands now. And they have locations in city plazas as well as on court streets that have both one side is for recycling single-use cups and trying to test collecting that as a stream and market, find the end markets for that. And then the other side, which is really innovative, is for the reusable cups, where there's a QR code on the cup where you can scan the code on the bin and the cup and get your refund through that. And that's an open source pilot where any company who participates in the program, as long as they've got QR codes on their cups, can participate. They just expanded that recently. I think it was in January, from beyond the downtown core to broader parts of the city. We'd be happy to share that information with council along the Broadway corridor and as well up on Cambie. So really moving it outside the downtown core, I think that's very exciting.
Okay, thank you. I'll pause there.
And I'll just add, so our role in that is to support that pilot through the provision of city sidewalks to allow them to provide receptacles.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dominato. Councillor Zhou.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I just have one question that, thanks for the presentation on all the work behind. Yeah, I just had one question from the community members. So I think it's a very good question. I just don't know the answer to the question. So I hope you can help me on that question. So, the people I talk to, vast majority of people supporting this regulation on single-use plastic items, it will eventually reduce the solid waste and very good for our environment. But the people concerning that the increase of this reusable item will increase the consumption of waters, which will be another very valuable natural resource. And eventually it will increase our liquid waste. So also it maybe increase our greenhouse emissions, right? So how do we balance this?
Yeah, so the United Nations Environment Program's report with the peer-reviewed literature showed that there are different categories have different, impacts, but on the whole, reusable cups are generally found to be better for the environment than single-use plastic cups. And what we're trying to recommend with the province is we don't want to presuppose anything for BC's local context. You're absolutely right that, I think we could do modeling, that we could encourage the province to do the life cycle modeling to get a general sense to evaluate how reusable cups compared to single-use cups within BC's water supply, energy grid, we are a marine city, so there's also the litter impacts of plastic waste, and trying to balance those offs and understand the trade-offs in order to determine what would be the best approach or combination of approaches in BC.
Okay, so are you aware of any comprehensive evaluation from both perspectives, especially in the summer? We are always, have a limitation on the water, right? So are you aware of any comprehensive evaluation, or is there any study on the way?
Not for British Columbia yet. I'm not aware of that research,
Okay.
but there are peer-reviewed academic, there is literature on that.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear more about those studies.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all my question. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a quick couple of follow-up questions. We've heard about in recommendation C, as it relates to end user and also producer responsibility. And I have a few questions. It's been flagged to us. I mean, of course, in Vancouver, we have a really innovative program around Binner's Project. You mentioned it in your presentation. And I think there's an appetite to be involved in some of these conversations and not necessarily sort of getting an update or a report out. So as we're working with the province to sort of broaden that perspective in terms of engagement with stakeholders, there's an interest to add language to recommendations, just to make sure that we're sort of really broadening, but also naming some of those key partners and stakeholders that could even help the province sort of look more thoughtfully and even partner with other municipalities that can provide similar solutions and ideas to how these coffee cups get recycled at the end of the day and who's doing it. Knowing that we can see consumer behavior is, generally speaking, they're going into the garbage, and it creates a really great opportunity for folks. Vestibules next to coffee cups go here, and it really creates this great opportunity for folks in terms of income generation. So I just want to get thoughts from staff on whether any additional language could be unhelpful or helpful, but with the appetite that adding more specific language would ensure that we don't miss anybody in that consultation.
Yeah, I think more specific language, we kept it quite general and quite broad, so we wouldn't presuppose anything, but we did see the feedback submitted by the Binner's Project yesterday that was sent to council, and some fine-tuning around wording around working with industry to ensure single-use plastic cups are recyclable. I think that's a constructive recommendation. I understand that may be under consideration, so.
Okay, great. Yeah, and just appreciating the work on this. I know it's been quite a conversation for us around this council chambers, bridging also to previous council and the work that staff have done to continue to come back and update and sort of inform council on the best way forward, while there is a lot of legislation changes happening at the federal and provincial government. So, Chair, seeing no one else on the queue, I'm happy to move the recommendation. As well as I have an amendment I'd like to propose.
Good. Okay. Well, with that being the case, we have to wait for speakers, so we will
okay.
think that
Thank you.
everybody has. Thank you, staff, for your fantastic presentation and responses. And we will now go to our first speaker, who is Peter Brown. Peter is on the phone. Good morning, Peter. You have
Good morning.
you have 3 minutes.
Okay, there you go. Good morning, Council. My name is Peter Brown. I'm the chair of the Persons with Disability Advisory Committee, and I would like to commit the support of PDAC for recommendation B as outlined in the Council report dated February 7, 2024. PDAC has had a significant involvement in the creation of the City of Vancouver plastic straw bylaw, which, to the credit of Council, was passed and provides sufficient accessibility and substance for persons with disabilities who require the use of a straw to eat and drink. The exceptions allow for persons with disabilities to maintain their dignity and be included within city life. In short, the City of Vancouver absolutely got it right. The federal single-use plastics prohibition regulations unfortunately, has failed to understand the necessity and benefits of the accessibility accommodations included within the Vancouver City bylaw. It is important to remember many persons with disability are marginalized and face many barriers to participating in public life. The city bylaw was a step in the right direction in eliminating a barrier to full accessibility and inclusion within our city. People with disability also often live lives which are necessarily fixed to routine and reliance. Any interference to these advances can be a major barrier to any attempt to participate or assimilate within our society, which may have the associated consequence of diminished mental health. The city bylaw provides a fair and reasonable balance between the need to address climate challenges arising from the use of plastics and the need to promote accessibility and avoid undue hardship on persons with disabilities. The current bylaw reflects the commitment of this council to the accessibility strategy, which was passed in July 2022, as well as the principles of the Accessible BC Act. Beyond doing what is right, the requested amendments to federal regulation maintains public confidence in the federal government's commitment to the principles of the Accessible Canada Act, which includes the diversity, inclusion, and the recognition of intersectionality, of marginalization, and discrimination faced by persons with disabilities. In short, the City of Vancouver shows leadership and accessibility through the inclusion of appropriate accessible exemptions within their applicable passenger bylaw. We respectfully ask that the city continue this leadership by advocating for similar federal exemptions in discussions with the appropriate federal officials. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your remarks, Peter, and for your contributions to as chair of the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee. So we will now move on to our next speaker, Mark von Schellwitz, Vice President of Restaurants Canada. Mark, are you on the phone?
I am here. Good morning, Council. My name is Mark von Schellwitz. I'm the Vice President of Western Canada for Restaurants Canada, which is Canada's largest hospitality industry association. And I'm here to speak in favor of the report and the recommendations. As Monica and staff will know, throughout our consultations on single-use items, we've always been concerned about the jurisdictional overlap and a patchwork of different bylaws, and always have been very supportive of a harmonized approach. This report now acknowledges that we do now have federal and provincial single-use item regulations, and therefore a lot of the city's bylaw is redundant. The report and its recommendations today supports as well the work that we've been doing with the Vancouver Hospitality Working Group, and one of our main objectives there, of course, was to reduce jurisdictional overlap, and this report certainly does that. So, just in short, Restaurants Canada fully supports today's report and all three recommendations, and would encourage Council to vote in favor of the report and the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All right, our next speaker is Jean Morton. Jean, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Jean Morton, and I am the Coordinator of Agency Supports for the Cerebral Palsy Association of BC. We strongly support Recommendation B of the Council report. Our association has been involved in the discussions around the plastic bendy straw since 2018, spurred on by those of our members who are adversely affected by the ban that was imposed that June. We are grateful that the Single-Use Plastics Reduction Committee was open-minded, listening to people who rely on this product for dignity and to prevent serious medical complications. Recommendation B satisfies the concerns that we expressed. However, we remain worried that the gains reflected through the city will not be respected in the regulations imposed by superseding jurisdictions as single-use plastic straws are taken over by the federal government. We all look forward to the day when there is ready access to an effective, more sustainable alternative to the flexible single plastic straw. Until that time comes, thank you for keeping Vancouver an inclusive community where even those with dysphasia can feel they belong. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, our next speaker on the phone is Tassia Alexis. Are you there?
No.
Okay, so third speaker is not available. All right, so we now have heard from our speakers. Committee members, are there any? So I think we've already moved the motion. No, okay, can somebody please move the motion? Councillor Bly, second, and Councillor Fry. All right, so do we have people on the line? Yes, we do. Councillor Bly, go ahead.
Thanks very much. And I do, as I indicated, have a amendment I'd like to move.
Okay, clerk, can we go, we'll go into the amendment queue. Okay, jump on there, Councillor. Go right ahead. Get you there. Very good. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So just, just be brief here as we have been discussing and staff sort of okay, thanks. Reiterated, my hope is to add language to recommendation C that includes after requesting provincial work in consultation with local governments that we identify industry and respective producer responsibility organizations. And other stakeholders is part of the original language in terms of developing circular cup packaging regulations consistent across BC, and then added languages including exploring broader end market acceptance of these materials from recyclers and exploring requirements on producers to innovate the way single-use cups are made to make them more recyclable and attractive to end markets. And I think that really just does address this unique environment that we have in these wonderful partners that we have in the City of Vancouver that have been incredibly innovative and creative in ensuring that there are programs that allow a flexible and creative income continuum and user opportunity around how these cups are a source of income for many. So that's the language, and I hope that it will be supported. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. Any other discussion? Or, oh, sorry, I just need a seconder first for Councillor Joe. Second the amendment. Sorry, was it you? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. I was looking. I don't have complete peripheral vision here. Okay. Is there any discussion around the amendment? Okay. Seeing none, can we please go to the voting panel? Okay, that passes unanimously. Very good. All right, so we'll go back to the main queue. And I see Councillor Kirby-Yung. Councillor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've also sent in an amendment, I think, following the train of adding some language to identify some of the explicit points that are really salient for Council. And that one really speaks, and Councillor Fry will know this from some of the discussions at Metro around, and I asked it in my questions about the ability to accept cups in the commercial waste stream as well. And some of that does become a sort of a choice of waste haulers. And so there's a bit of a potentially a broader opportunity to synthesize the approach there. Obviously, it's intersected with respects to materials and cup production, and all these other pieces. But it's a really important piece because without a choice when people are out and about, your choice really, unless you're diligently holding on to it, which I don't think a lot of people are, to take it home, is just to simply put it in the garbage when you're out and about instead of the commercial waste stream. So there's some very simple language that I think can be added to what is the end of what is now the amended C1 clause. And that is to advance the ability to accept cups in the commercial waste stream.
Okay, we will go to the amendment queue, and can I get a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Meisner, okay. Councillor Kirby-Yung, do you have anything further to add?
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Fry, your comments?
Yeah, I appreciate the intent of this. I'm struggling with the language though, and I'm wondering if I could ask maybe through you, Chair, to staff about how they interpret commercial waste stream. Because my impression of this is about putting them through circularity and reusables and recycling, not waste per se, which would imply, to my understanding of a waste stream, is not necessarily recycling and reuse, but rather incineration and landfill.
Go ahead.
I would interpret commercial waste quite broadly, but in case there is the misinterpretation, perhaps, if the intent is to have it as a commercial recycling stream, or commercial reuse and recycling stream, that might be clearer for others.
Okay, thank you. So I mean, and I'm wondering if it was to strike in the commercial waste stream, that sort of meets the kind of notion of putting it into recycling and circularity rather than waste, which we are zero waste.
Sorry. Councillor, are you directing your question to Councillor Kirby-Yung?
I'm just looking for eye contact with Councillor Kirby-Yung, and like agreement, and then I could provide a.
It's broadly because we can't accept them, we can't divert them to the appropriate uses. But do you want me to answer, or do you want eye contact?
You know what? I'll just, if it's okay, I'll just amend the amendment, add an amendment to the amendment.
Okay. Very good. All right.
And that would be to just.
Yeah, we need that to come in writing, Councillor.
Yep, and
just gonna
just looking for the strike through option here. Yeah, so. Yeah, we don't want to spend lots of time wordsmithing. I mean, I'm hoping this makes sense, and it's just the ability to accept cups. And by striking, I just sent it to the clerks.
I'll put us into amendment Q2, Councillor, and I will put you in there and advance you.
Oh, my apologies. I got cups in there. I meant to just be the ability to accept cups and strike through in the commercial waste stream.
Can I get a seconder for Councillor Bly? All right, Councillor Fry, any other comments?
Sorry, and I overzealously struck through cups. I didn't mean to strike cups out of that. So the ability to accept cups, period.
Acceptance.
Yes, it's all about acceptance.
Okay. Yeah. Don't want to. Okay, I'll advance then to Councillor Kirby-Yung. You finish your thoughts there, Councillor Kirby-Yung.
Yeah, I think I'm looking to ensure and I also don't want to get into wordsmithing, and I think the intent is there. So just speaking to Councillor Fry's earlier comment, it was around in the sort of commercial waste management area, like versus the residential. But I'm just looking to see that there's explicit language in here or earlier in the clause that links to the ICI, because not to parse the point, but cups are accepted in the residential stream, but not in the commercial. So the intention is yes, recycling. I just want to ensure, and I'm open to language, I just want to ensure that we are clear that the gap is in commercial, and by striking the words that we haven't acknowledged that there is a residential we haven't not acknowledged there's a residential acceptance today, if that makes sense. Since it's your amendment, and I don't necessarily want to get into the back and forth, but I just want to be sure that the intention is clear. I'm going to stop my clock now on that to see if Councillor Fry wants to ponder that and let Councillor Carr go. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Carr?
Yes, I'm also struggling with the Struggling with the language on this. So I'm unclear, to advance the ability to accept cups, is that in the circularity of packaging or in the waste stream? Sorry, but it just is not clear to me at this point in time. But we're at a point where you can't accept more amendments to the amendments. So to advance the ability to accept cups, if it's not in the waste stream, is it in the circularity? Through you, Chair, if I could ask a point of information to the mover of the amendment, to the amendment. Is it accepting cups in what?
As I read it, the circularity of industrial, commercial, and institutional packaging,
The circularity, okay. All right, so.
as
this is
opposed
meant be
as opposed to going to waste.
Got it. Thank you.
I would interpret as being landfill or incinerator, which is waste, as opposed to
Circularity, which
recycling or
is
reuse or-
reducing, reuse, recycle. Got it. Thank you for that. So therefore, I'll support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dominato.
I'm good. I think that clarified the point.
All right. Okay. So, seeing no other, clerk, can we go to the voting panel on the amendment as an amendment to the amendment? And we do have a seconder for Councillor Bye, so we're good for that. Go to the voting panel. Okay. And okay. Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. All right. So we're back to Amendment Q1. So we have the amended amendment. So now I believe we just need to go to the voting panel and let Councillor Fry, any further comments? Okay, so we'll advance you. We'll go to the voting panel, please. Councillor Montague. Yes. Correct. Very good. Thanks. Okay. So that passes unanimously. All right. Now we'll go back to the main queue. Okay, Councillor Kirby-Yung, further comments?
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate it. And to the other point, I think the intention is very clear: is that we can't recycle them, divert them, reuse them if we don't accept them in the first place. And so, language is important. But I think the intention is that right now we have streams that come in and we sort a number of materials. Some go to waste energy, some get recycled, some do whatever. So the intent around the language is that you have to accept them into the pipeline in the first place in order to appropriately deal with them. So I wanted to clarify that because I think that the issue right now is that there is no option to start down that path. And I appreciate the addition. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Dominato?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I've circulated an amendment to be a further that addition under.
Okay, so I'm going to move us to an amendment queue, and I will, seconded by Councillor Bly. Okay, Councillor Dominato?
Yes, and thank you. And so this would fall under staff recommendation B, which pertains to preparing a letter to the federal minister, but this would be a further addition. Further, the council directs staff to write the Federation of Canadian Municipalities about today's report and the need to amend the federal single-use plastics prohibition regulations in order to enhance accessibility under the federal plastic straw ban. And really the intent here is to elevate the discussion to FCM, which is representing municipalities on federal issues. And we will be meeting next week. And I think the follow-up to this would be that, and just didn't have the time for today, is to prepare a resolution and bring it to this council to be passed to go to FCM. So it could be part of, embedded into that advocacy work. So that's my proposal, but just as a starting point, that we have staff write FCM and communicate the report and what we think is necessary to ensure accessibility for residents across the country.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much. I just want to lend my support to this. I think it's important that we recognize the the groups and the power of lobbying these types of issues to the federal government. We have a very interesting role here of governing, but we're also required to take some of these local issues to higher levels of government. And FCM is a great sort of engine to make that happen. So we're unlikely to call up a federal minister perhaps and be able to get them to respond on this single issue, but we can leverage our partnerships with FCM and UBCM and others to be able to get it on the docket of conversation in November during advocacy days in Ottawa, where we get to go to ministers' offices and sit down and say what is important to you and the residents of the city that you govern. And I would say that this is a very important issue. So just sort of to lay out, I know many around this table understand what this amendment means, but many of the public may not understand how important it is that we make these additions. So thank you, Councilor Dominato, for both being at that board table at FCM, but also your leadership on this.
Can I get a seconder for that?
I already seconded
Oh,
the
you did
motion.
already second.
Yeah, thanks.
Very good. Councillor Bly, second that. All right. Advancing the queue here. All right. Clerk, please take us to the voting panel. Okay, that passes unanimously. We'll go back to the main queue. Councillor Dominato, further thoughts?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. All right. If there's no other discussion, we will take this to a vote. And that passes unanimously. Very good. That concludes that item. Thanks very much, staff, and thank you, council, for great discussion. All right, so that completes report one. Move on to we have all these items through 6 have already been conducted. So we now will be moving on to item 7, councillor members' motions.
Chair, may I just, a point of procedure perhaps? Given we have 2 items left on our agenda and granted speakers, I actually just wanted to maybe ask for a 5-minute recess at the moment and propose that we continue the agenda today instead of breaking for lunch at noon. It gives certainty to our speakers. And we only have 2 more items on the agenda, and it's only 10:50 at this
You're
point.
moving that we would extend to finish the business before breaking for lunch.
We're just finishing the business for the day.
Can I get a seconder? Councillor Montague, all those in favor? Okay, and we will take a quick 5-minute recess before continuing on. Okay, it looks like we have everybody back and we have quorum. So the next item on council member motions, number 7 in your package today is motion 1, request for leaves of absence. We have the following requests. Councillor Bly for civic business from meetings on February 29th and March 12th, 2024 from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Councillor Dominato for civic business from meetings on February 29th and March 12th, 2024 from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And Councillor Meisner for civic business from meetings on February 29th, 2024 from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Do we have a mover? Councillor Meisner, seconded Councillor Bly. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say yay. Okay. All those opposed say nay. Okay, that passes unanimously. That concludes the motion 1 on the agenda. All right. The next item is motion 2, recertifying Vancouver as a living wage employer, and it is being moved and introduced by Councillor Boyle. Councillor Boyle, here, we'll put you on the queue.
Thanks so much. So I am asking council to recertify as a living wage employer. The living wage is good for employers. It means less job turnover, more productivity and job satisfaction, and a healthier, happier workforce. The living wage is also good for communities. It means people can live near where they work rather than being forced to commute an hour or 2 each direction, which matters for the health of a community. It allows people to get to know their neighbors and have time to volunteer and more. And the living wage is good for people. It means less stress about paying bills, not going to work sick, not hustling between multiple jobs. It means not needing to go hungry or to rely on a food bank. It means dignity and rest and a chance to dream about the future. And I also want to point out that the living wage calculation that we know that the Living Wage for Families campaign calculates each year is calculated based on the costs of a family with 2 income earners and 2 kids, though the numbers are similar for a single person. But the family calculation is important because the living wage is also about healthy childhood development. It's about a warm coat and healthy food, not having to miss birthday parties. It's about having time to spend with your kids or having your parent available to be at your soccer game on the weekend. Living wage is good for all of us. It lifts all of us up, and it matters that the City of Vancouver make this statement of supporting workers living in Vancouver in a tangible way so that the folks we interact with all the time have the dignity and stability of knowing they're making enough to live in Vancouver.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. And Councillor Carr has seconded. All right, we will now hear from registered speakers for this motion. Public speakers should state whether they are in support or opposition of recommendations and may only speak once and have up to 3 minutes to speak. So I'll ask speakers if they are residents of Vancouver. It is not noted on the speakers list. Our first public speaker is Stephen Von Schakowsky. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the time to be here to speak this evening. My name is Stefan von Sachowski. I'm here to speak in favor of the motion on recertifying as living wage employer. I'm the president of the Vancouver and District Labour Council. We represent over 90 affiliated local unions and over 60,000 union members in the City of Vancouver, Richmond, and across the North Shore. As I say, here to speak in favor of the motion recertifying Vancouver as living wage employer. While many of the workers who are impacted by the living wage policy are non-union, it's our belief that union or not, work should lift you out of poverty, not keep you there. The City of Vancouver was a fairly early adopter of the living wage policy back in 2016. And we were very proud to be part of a very broad coalition of labor, community, and faith organizations that got the attention of those who sat in these chambers at that time and were able to achieve a unanimous vote of support to bring in a living wage policy that year. Each year thereafter, the living wage was recertified by the city without controversy. You know, it was popular, it was broadly supported, and since that time, many other employers and many other municipalities as well in this region and across the province have become living wage employers. Now over 400 employers across the province of British Columbia. Despite the increase in living wage rate in recent years, and we know it has increased, with the rate of inflation, the number of living wage employers has also increased despite that increase in the rate. And no other municipality here in the region or across the province has stepped away from its commitment. So why? I think because it's the right thing to do and because it works. Living wage helps workers get by during the ongoing difficult affordability crisis that we're facing. It brings dollars into the local economy. It helps those who work here to be able to live here as well, improves morale and retention and recruitment, and shows value and respect for the people who keep the city running. It's not a bold ask for high wages. It's not a luxury wage. It's really intended to provide the basic necessities that workers need in order to be able to live here in the city. So we're talking about, basics that folks need. Doing that, ensuring that folks can live here in the city where they work, that's important, right? That makes a better city. That makes a city that will meet its goals in terms of inclusivity, resiliency, climate goals, and more. So thank you very much. Encourage you to vote to support this motion.
Thank you very much. All right, our next speaker is Gary Charles Jarvis. Gary? Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Right.
Gary Jarvis. I work at the library and I'm a member of CUPE Union Local 391. I'm speaking in support of the motion to recertify the living wage. As I said, I'm a worker at VPL. I myself was directly and positively impacted by the introduction of the living wage in 2017. Yet today there are workers at the library who are not earning a living wage. Not having a living wage in Vancouver means tough spending decisions for library employees. For example, buying new shoes for a child or getting by with well-used shoes, to simple things like making coffee in the break room rather than buying a coffee. My colleague Stephanie Pereira, like myself, has worked at the library for over a decade. She places books on the shelves and makes $2 less than the living wage. A new worker at the library today in that role will be earning almost $3.50 below the living wage. Library workers continue to earn 2022 wages, and coupled with the decision to remove the living wage, an increasing number of staff at the library are earning wages that after deductions fall below the living wage. It impacts every spending choice from rent to groceries and creates daily stress for workers. Even staff with more senior roles are earning less than the living wage. My colleague Adriana Carrier-Giannis works below the living wage for doing the same work as myself, as she is a new employee, but we do the same work. At the time of the introduction of the living wage, I was working as a bookshelver, earning less than $17 an hour. The introduction of the living wage influenced Vancouver Public Library to create a living wage position of employment. My job role was adapted by the library, and there was instantly a huge jump in morale of library workers. Overnight, I was able to work a new role with increased job duties, a reduction in the risk of injury from repetitive work, and best of all, I was now earning a living wage. I saw my wage climb by $4 overnight. I know for myself and my peers, it was easier to buy essentials, to having a little bit more disposable income for celebrating birthdays. Moving forward to 2023, and the decision to remove the living wage has had an immediate impact on the City of Vancouver employees at the library. As a worker advocate and a union member, as well as a city employee, I believe that all workers at the library and all workers in our city should be earning the living wage. I fundamentally believe that the benefits that I enjoy as a worker should be the benefits all workers enjoy. I strongly encourage the City of Vancouver to bring back the living wage. Thanks for this opportunity to speak to City Council in support of the living wage.
Thanks very much. Okay, our next speaker here in person is Anastasia French. Welcome to the podium.
Hello. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of this motion. I'm Anastasia French. I'm Provincial Manager for Living Wage for Families BC, and I live and work on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, now known as the City of Vancouver. Last year, we at the Living Wage for Families BC were incredibly disappointed when the City of Vancouver became the only municipality in Canada to decertify as a living wage employer. This decision meant that hundreds of city workers and contractors doing vital work like cleaning, stacking shelves in the library, keeping us safe as security guards, were no longer actually earning enough income that meant they could pay for food, rent, and basic essentials. In 2023, the living wage did increase dramatically, and it represented a challenge for many businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities to implement. However, the vast majority of those organisations, over 400 of them, including the cities of Victoria, Burnaby, and North Vancouver, looked at their budgets and they made it work. They knew that paying the living wage to their workers wasn't just the right thing to do, but it made business sense as well. In fact, 96% of living wage employers in BC found a benefit from being in the programme. It lowered staff turnover, it increased retention, it increased morale, all helping the business case as well. The City of Vancouver was the only large organisation to drop out of the programme. I hope today we can make up for that mistake and get back on track and recertify as a living wage employer. Having recently, yesterday, read the staff report that accompanied the decision last year, I wanted to address one thing. When we met with staff, we never said that we thought that the living wage was going to be going down. We were very clear that we can't predict which way the economy was going to go, but all indicators were that housing and food costs were going up, and probably the living wage was going to go up too. And right now, unfortunately, that continues to be the case. I really wish it wasn't. Given the decision that you took as council last year was based on false information, I'd encourage you to reconsider and support plans to recertify as a living wage employer. The decision to move towards a 5-year rolling average ignores the complete reason why the living wage exists. The living wage reflects how much you need to earn right now to pay for food and rent. Try arguing in the grocery store that you're not going to pay $5 for some lettuce that was a lot cheaper 5 years ago. Or with a potential landlord that rents were 50% cheaper 5 years ago, so can you have $1,000 off the rent? They'd all roll their eyes at you and insist that you need to pay the new higher costs. To argue that paying a lower fair wage creates more stability for workers in unstable times is simply not true. Unfortunately, we live in really uncertain times, and the best thing to help a worker through that uncertainty is for them to know that their employer, their city, has their back. And when rent and food costs go up, so will their wages. In a city as expensive as Vancouver, it's vital that City Council leads by example and ensures that all their workers can afford to live in Vancouver so they can keep spending money in Vancouver. I urge you to support this motion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker is William Azaroff, and he's on the phone.
Hi.
Hi, William. Go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm William Azaroff. I'm a resident of Vancouver, and I'm speaking in favor of the motion. I'm the CEO of Brightside Community Homes Foundation, a not-for-profit housing society based in Vancouver. And we've been a certified living wage employer since 2019. And a quick anecdote, it actually was up for debate at my first board meeting after joining Brightside. I think I'd been on board for a few days. And the board had a document in front of them that listed pros and cons of being a living wage employer. And one of the board members pointed to our mission, vision, and values on the wall of our boardroom and said, this really isn't a pro and con conversation. This is a values-based conversation. And it switched the entire dialogue. At that point, I knew I joined the right organization because it is a values-based decision. And we see, we're a not-for-profit organization providing affordable homes in one of the most unaffordable cities in British Columbia. And we have a fundamental first-hand understanding of the challenges facing those that struggle to meet the demands of market housing. So ensuring that employees are paid a living wage, we see it as an absolute necessity. We see a direct connection between paying a living wage and people being able to afford to live in the city. So we strongly support and recommend that the city readopt the living wage certification. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. All right, our next speaker is Lama Mugabo. Are you on the phone, Lama?
Yes, I am.
All right, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Lama Mugabo. I use the pronouns he, him, and I'm here today representing the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. I'm here to speak in favor of the motion for the City of Vancouver to reinstate its living wage policy for all employees and contractors with the city. As someone who works for a living wage employer, I can speak to the importance of making a living wage. I recall when I didn't make a living wage and deciding between healthcare, transit, and rent is an impossible choice. It's one that people in the city make every day. The people who work for the City of Vancouver deserve the peace of mind of knowing they can afford to live in the city where they work. People shouldn't have to work more than one full-time job to make ends meet. The living wage is not an extravagant number. Economists carefully calculate it using cost of living data, tailor it to each municipality, and update it annually. The living wage for the City of Vancouver is currently at $25.68. In contrast, the City of Vancouver's current baseline fair wage is $21.86 per hour, a difference of about $8,000 a year from the living wage. That amount could cover someone's groceries for nearly a year. By paying employees and contractors lower than the local living wage, the City of Vancouver risks offloading additional costs onto their employees, including the cost in time and money of transportation from other communities in the Lower Mainland to their work sites in Vancouver. By paying the City of Vancouver employees a living wage, that money has the potential to be reinvested back into our community in local businesses and seasonal events. By reinstating the city's living wage policy, you can set an example for employers nationwide. Workers in Vancouver and across British Columbia deserve a dignified wage that accurately reflects the cost of living. In closing, the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition favors this motion. All workers in BC deserve a living wage. That must include people who work for our province's biggest municipality. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for your comments. All right, our next speaker here in person, I think, is Audrey Gay. Welcome. Go ahead.
My name is Audrey Gay. I'm the president of the board of Metro Vancouver Alliance. I live in Strathcona, and I support the motion. Metro Vancouver Alliance is a broad-based alliance of over 30 membership organizations. Our members are faith congregations, labor unions, and community nonprofits. Together, we build relational people power to make a better city. We do not agree on everything, but we focus on what we agree on. In 2014, our members found common ground in support of the City of Vancouver to become a living wage employer. Our members agreed on a simple notion: work should lift you out of poverty, not keep you there. If you work a full-time job, you should not struggle to meet your basic needs. And if you work full-time for the city, you should definitely be able to live here. During the municipal election of 2014, we organized an assembly where we invited mayoral candidates to hear from our members about why this issue mattered to them. That night, every single candidate from every party committed that if elected, they would lead the City of Vancouver into being a certified living wage employer. Following the election, our diverse members met with city councillors to secure their support for the motion. And the day the motion came to a vote, it won unanimous support. In a rare occurrence of Vancouver politics, there was a celebration rally outside of City Hall. The media noted that it was the first time anyone had ever organized a rally in support of councillors' actions. The Metro Vancouver Alliance demonstrated that paying a living wage is a nonpartisan issue. Baptist pastors, library workers, Jewish youth, hospital employees, Filipino Catholics, we all agree that paying a living wage makes common sense. Your vote today signals something about who you believe this city is for. I'm here today on behalf of the Metro Vancouver Alliance Board of Directors. We are library workers, postal workers, caretakers, hairdressers, care aides, and clergy. We are urban Indigenous, Filipino immigrants, and white settlers. We are atheists, Anglicans, Catholics, and Lutheran. We live and work to make this city home. And we are watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, our next speaker is Tristan Foy. Tristan, if you're here. Welcome, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Hi there, my name is Tristan Foy. I live in South Vancouver, and I'm just here as an individual citizen to speak on this motion, and I am in support of it. I urge all of you to vote in favor of recertifying the City of Vancouver as a living wage employer. As I said, I'm just here as an individual. I earn minimum wage at my job. I do not work for the City of Vancouver. However, I believe that everyone, regardless of whether they work for the City of Vancouver or for a restaurant like I do, should earn a living wage. And the province of BC just announced that they'd be raising the minimum wage by 65 cents to $17.40 an hour, which is well below the living wage that is estimated for Vancouver. And I love Vancouver. I love living here. I'm not originally from here. I'm originally from Manitoba, but Vancouver has become my new home. And I believe that if somebody works for the City of Vancouver and does make a living to make Vancouver the great city that it is, that they should be paid a living wage and that they should be able to afford to live in this city. Again, I'm originally from Winnipeg, and so I know firsthand the difference in the cost of living in Winnipeg versus in Vancouver. And Vancouver is a much more expensive city to live in. And I'm very fortunate for myself. The restaurant that I work in, I earn tips. And so in addition to the minimum wage job that I am employed at, I am able to top up that wage with those tips that I earn. If I did not earn those tips, I would be in a very different situation. In addition to my restaurant job, I also have 2 additional jobs. So in total, I work 3 jobs as well as auditioning often. I'm an actor. And so I just came out here because I feel very strongly that the city's decision to decertify as a living wage employer was the wrong decision. And I am very hopeful that all of you will vote to support this motion, to recertify, because it's the right thing to do, and because everyone in this city and everywhere, I believe, deserves to earn a living wage regardless of what they do for their work or who they are, just because earning a living wage means that you can live a dignified life. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right. Second to last speaker is Jose Rayeros. Jose? Welcome.
Council members, advocates, and city workers, more importantly, thanks for hosting this session today. My name is Jose Rayeros, and I'm an immigrant and student at UBC. I work in climate well-being and labor for student workers. There's probably a chance that you're one of those if you're in this city. I'm a supporter in the motion to reinstate the living wage. Usually, I have a megaphone and do chants for climate action and mobilize thousands of people on the other side of that wall. But as I approach graduation, my values and priorities get more complicated with employment and affordability concerns. Youth, immigrants, and students can only survive in the housing, health, and climate crisis by working multiple jobs. That's how I'm here. The costs rise, and we're not getting a chance to keep up. We don't feel like the city represents us. For youth, immigrant, and students, the living wage is a glimpse of hope to build a life in Vancouver. So I want to leave you a question. How can we expect to ever be represented if city workers can't afford to live here? The city should be paying a living wage so that all city workers can afford to live here in the community that they contribute to so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next and final speaker is Carly Booker on the phone. Carly, are you there?
We're just checking, Chair Lawson. Sometimes the speakers follow the delayed feed. But we're not seeing anything. No.
Okay. All right. Well, that concludes speakers then. Committee members, is there any discussion? Councillor Carr.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Thank you to the speakers who came. Your very powerful statements really were meaningful to me. And I was happy to second this motion because I've always stood for a living wage. And I think that it is incredibly important to maintain a living wage, especially at a time when costs are rising. So I'm not sure why some people feel that when costs are rising, you can remove the living wage, when it in fact is that very time when we need to continue to support the living wage. So I was on council when we voted for it originally. It was a mixed council. It was Vision, NPA, and myself, and it was unanimous. I just want to remind you that it was unanimous at a time when certainly costs were also rising within Vancouver. And why were people at that point in time interested in it? And it's because I believe everyone on council then was concerned about the quality of life and fairness for everyone within the city. So I'm going to ask you as councillors to think about what you have committed to this term in terms of the 2024 to 2028 priorities for this council. And amongst those priorities, 23 to 26, what am I saying, 28, we'll end in 26. Vancouver, the statement we have on our priorities is Vancouver City Council is working together to build a sustainable city in which everyone can live, work, and thrive. And one of the specific priorities, strategic objective number 7, is a healthy, inclusive, and equitable city. With the statement, we strive to alleviate barriers to residents' well-being. Not having sufficient income to adequately feed or house your family is a barrier. So think about that. Supporting the living wage is in line with the priorities that we all unanimously endorsed for this term. I want you to think about who you believe the city is for. And if it's not for everyone who is working and living here, regardless of the kind of job or income, everyone who lives here should be able to afford a place to live that's decent, should be able to afford food, should be able to afford a safe quality of life for their families. So my hope is that you will reconsider the vote that you may have cast the last time on this issue, and this time vote in support of a living wage.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Against the better judgment of the clerk, I'm just going to make a little reset here because we're on the question queue and it should be on the main queue. So I'm going to just reload everybody in here. I've got your names in order, but Councillor Montague, Fry, Bly, Meisner, and Joe. Okay, there we go. I'll advance you. Hey, bonus points from... All right, here we go. Councillor Montague, go right ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Just some clarifying questions through you to staff, if I could. If you could talk about the what the COV has as far as existing policy framework around fair wage. That's to the city manager, or?
Certainly. Thanks through the chair. So the policy, the fair wage policy that the city has in place basically applies the same premise as the Living Wage for Family campaign in terms of how it applies. So to city staff and to contractors that are providing services on city premises. The difference is in the calculation of the wage and benefit threshold. So we are currently applying a calculation that averages that out over 5 years. So taking that Living Wage for Families threshold, averaging over a period of time and using that as and then adjusting that year to year. Otherwise, the remainder of the program is the same.
So you're still using the living wage as a benchmark?
Yes, it's just averaged. It's not a year to year. It's averaged every year.
Okay. And I know we've discussed this before. What sort of administrative challenges are associated with the actual certification?
So I think the primary challenge is the fact that it's unknown in advance, and there has been significant fluctuation in that number over time, often up, sometimes downward. So from an organizational standpoint, it's challenging. And then, in 2022, there was a very significant change upward, 17%, in excess of 17%, which does make it difficult to administer in terms of impact on our wage scales for internal employees and obviously for I can't speak for our contractors as well. So that's the administrative challenge for us. As council knows, we typically, for example, our collective agreements, we negotiate and plan wage increases several years in advance, taking into account projected inflation and so on. So that's when we see that level of fluctuation, that was the primary challenge that we, from an administrative standpoint, that we were wrestling with.
Okay. And one more clarifying question from me. How many City of Vancouver employees make below that living wage number?
We would have to go and do that work, Councillor, to assess. As you know, our inside workers have just concluded a new collective agreement that provides for quite significant general wage increases as well as one-time inflationary adjustment payments. So we will have, subject to Council's decision today, that's analysis that we can go and do. When the policy was implemented years back, there was a relatively small number in the range of 100 to 200, but I can't give you a specific answer today. We would have to do that work based on what the current compensation levels are.
Okay. There was reference today by one of the speakers that there were literally hundreds of City of Vancouver employees that were making below that wage. And
that's not my understanding. I expect the number would be smaller than that.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions for now, Chair. I may come back on.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fry.
I want to acknowledge and appreciate the clarifications around fair wage versus living wage and 5-year averaging and those kind of nuances. Of course, those nuances don't really reflect the reality of working folk. $1 last year doesn't go as far as $1 this year, doesn't go as far as $1 next year. Those are the realities of wages and living in a city like Vancouver. And, I think my one fault with Councillor Boyle's motion was that it didn't actually articulate who we're talking about here. But I think Anastasia French kind of touched on some of that by mentioning it's people who work security, who we've increased the amount of security here at City Hall. A lot of those security contractors who are right on the front line, people who clean in our facilities, were also on the front line and who kept us safe during COVID by going the extra mile and doing a lot of that cleaning. That's the people that we're talking about, people who we rely on and we use quite extensively in the city of Vancouver. And in order to keep us safe, us sitting in this room who don't really have to worry about, you know, a living wage or a fair wage because we're well compensated. But I think if we're expecting folks to do the work, we should really pay them accordingly. And I think that is the gist of recognizing through this campaign that the cost of living is in flux, and it's an expensive city to live in, and we need to reflect that in our you know, wage appropriateness for folks who do the work. I don't want to get too much into it. I didn't support the decision to decertify last year. I do support this motion. But I just want to also remind everybody that you know, one of the big social determinants of health is poverty, and the ability to eat well, the ability to take care of one's health, you know, living, transit, all those kind of things. Those are all reflected as social determinants of health, which are directly tied to the wages. And I want to remind this council that we collectively approved a vision statement called Vibrant Vancouver. And we had 9 strategic objectives. And one of those, number 7, is healthy, inclusive, and equitable. We put Vancouverites' physical and mental health front and center as we make service, infrastructure, and policy decisions and strive to alleviate barriers to residents' well-being and sense of belonging. I think if we're going to be honest about this Vibrant Vancouver and the strategic objectives, then we need to continue ensuring that all of our employees are receiving a living wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much. Just have a couple of follow-up questions through you, Chair, to the City Manager. I wonder if you can, could you actually just remind Council, how many employees do we have at the City of Vancouver?
The City of Vancouver itself, so excluding the Vancouver Police Department and Vancouver Public Library, is roughly 8,600 head count.
8,600? Okay. And so right now, I think the number that was asked previously and in the in-camera report is there may be about 100 and who knows?
It's in that range.
About 100 out of 800.
We'll have to do that assessment, yeah.
Out of 8,600. Okay, that may not meet the threshold of the living wage.
Yes.
Stipulated, okay. I just wonder also if you could clarify, the City of Vancouver was the largest city across the country to adopt the living wage?
At the time, that was my understanding.
At the time? Okay. There were, I understand that there's been sort of significant fluctuations, and 3 out of the past 6 years that the City of Vancouver has been a living wage employer certified, let's just say, because we are a fair wage employer across the board regardless. It dipped below, that wage dipped below our lowest paid rate, meaning in theory, we would have to have lowered how much we pay our workers?
Yes, Councillor, since 2016, I believe there were 3 years in which the living wage threshold actually decreased in the Lower Mainland. The city did not decrease our threshold. Obviously, the notion of decreasing people's pay is quite challenging. So we maintained that level
Okay.
and did not reduce it.
And City of Vancouver was a top employer for 2023,
Yes.
even after this change?
Yes, in terms of that particular recognition program.
And do we know if City of Vancouver is going to be a top employer for 2024?
I do not know the answer to that. I don't believe we've been notified of that yet.
Okay, maybe city staff can confirm. I'm going to come off the queue for just a second and then come back on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Meisner.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And we are a top employer for 2024 in BC. But just a point of information through you, Chair, to the City Manager, if I may. Just wondering if you could elaborate if there's any impact if we were to return to a living wage employer. What sort of impact or unintended consequences might that have on City of Vancouver collective agreements, for example?
So yeah, Councillor, it's we would have to do that assessment. I think there is currently a differential between the city's fair wage policy and the 2568 living wage threshold. That is material. So we would have to assess. Obviously, there's a group of employees who I expect it would apply to. Although again, it's not clear how many, given the adjustments to our collective agreements, and those include very significant one-time inflation adjustment payments. So for 2024, I'm not sure that any of our employees would fall below. They might. But if there are adjustments required in those rates, it may start to impact other parts of our salary schedule, so supervisors and so on. We can't have people earning less than the folks supervising them. So those are the types of challenges, administrative challenges, that we would have to do more detailed assessment on.
Okay, so just to clarify what you were just saying, because of some of those inflationary adjustments and one-time payments that were made in those collective agreements, we're not even sure if we have any staff currently that are below the current living wage.
For 2024, again, because there was one-time payments built into that, we would have to do that assessment. Now, those aren't ongoing, so that's one of the challenges that we'd be looking at this year is how to factor those one-time payments in for 2024.
Okay, that's important information. Thank you for that. Another question. Actually, was a point that was raised by the speaker, who's the provincial manager for Living Wage for Families BC, that said that council was making its decision based on false information that was in the in-camera report that was released yesterday, and that is now publicly available. And that says, quote, in speaking with LWFBC, they indicated that they expected their calculation to result in a decrease in future years based on planned actions by senior levels of government in the areas of housing, childcare, and transportation. So I'm just trying to square those two things, what's in the in-camera report that was released yesterday, which is what we based our decision on originally, and then the comments today from the speaker. Do you have any insight into that?
Through the chair, I can't speak to that directly. I was not in the meeting that was referenced personally, so we would have to go back to the staff that were there to determine whether there was some sort of misunderstanding or miscommunication. That's the first time obviously it's the first time that they've seen that report, so that's an issue we would have to look into further, Councillor, to identify if there was a disconnect there, where that might have come from.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess just finally, going back to my first question, what I'm trying to get at is that if we did adopt the living wage again, would there be pressure on some of those collective agreements to, again, raise those wages? Because perhaps we'd have people that would now be making the living wage as stipulated by the program of $25.80, I believe. But we may have people in collective agreements that are also making $25.80, for example. Can you elaborate on what could happen there?
Certainly. So we in the past, we have adjusted our rates for our unionized staff as well. So whether, and generally the staff that we're talking about here are subject to collective agreements. So we would have to, again, identify who those folks are, as well as any knock-on impacts in our negotiated salary scales. Have a discussion with the union and talk about which of those adjustments we would need to make, and then have those applied. At this point, again, we haven't done that analysis, so I couldn't speak to you on the specifics of that, but that would be the steps we would take.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, considering we've renegotiated many of those collective agreements successfully, that would, just very recently, that would cause, I think, a lot of uncertainty. Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zhou.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I also can confirm that City of Vancouver is on the list of BC top employers in BC. That was the report just released 2 weeks ago. Question is a point of information through you, Chair, to, I don't know, City Manager or our Chief Human Resource Officer. So, when people talk about affordability, it's a very broad term for our employees. So other than wages, are there any other programs we have in the city to support affordability for our staff? Like, for instance, I don't know, the extended health or other program.
Thanks, through the chair. So yes, our collective agreements and our compensation programs for our exempt staff do provide a range of benefits in addition to salary. The living wage calculation does factor in a number of those benefits as well. So that living wage threshold does not only include wages, it includes the value of some of those benefits. There's a much more detailed kind of methodology as to how that number is calculated. But certainly the city does provide, and those benefits vary depending on whether the staff are in regular roles or whether they're auxiliaries. So but in every case, employees receive compensation over and above their base rate.
Okay, so I guess for the smaller employers, they probably don't have like extended health or retirement planning programs like what we offer to our staff, right?
So things like, no, it would vary by employer. Some employers would provide those. And again, the calculation does factor in the availability or not of those benefits.
Okay. The other question is, so last year we weren't certified by the living wage because of the decision. So have you heard any feedback from our staff regarding the decertifies last year?
I think there's two. Certainly, there were. I would say it's fair that through the chair, there was some concern expressed by some staff around the city's move away from that program. There was a fair amount of uncertainty around what the fair wage policy would be in replacement of that. I think there was some confusion, and obviously for some staff that were directly impacted by it. So we did hear some feedback from staff around it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'll leave it here. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, a point of information to the city manager. I'm just curious if you could expand on, with the living wage program in place, it stipulated the city must implement measures to ensure that direct employees and individuals employed by service providers, including subcontractors, were compensated at the or above the benchmark. I'm just curious, over the course of having that program in place, were staff able to validate that all of our service providers, including subcontractors and our service providers, such as the ones doing our micro cleaning, were meeting that benchmark? Because it's quite a few. I'm just curious because that was a stipulation and requirement.
There were, yes. So we did and still do have requirements in our contracts regarding the obligation for contractors to meet those requirements. They do indicate to us that they do. I don't, and our Chief Procurement Officer here is, Alex Ralph is here as well. He can elaborate on this. I don't understand that we're doing proactive audits, but certainly if there were complaints, then we would have cause under those contracts to review and validate, in fact, that the compensation being paid was consistent with both the fair wage policy currently and then previously the living wage program.
Thank you. And just tangentially related to that is that, and I believe staff are working on this, but we've had a sustainable and ethical procurement program in place, looking at social procurement. And to my recollection, having chaired a nonprofit, we had a supported employment program. And some of those supported employment programs, the intent is to get people reconnected to work. They do service provision for the city or other agencies, but they aren't able to meet those benchmarks just because of the nature of their organizations, their funding sources, even the hours that these individuals are completing. And I was just curious if that was factored into the previous program as part of being certified. Because I think what I'm getting at is that we had an intent to support social procurement, and sometimes that there may not have achieved the benchmarking that was set out.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Alex Ralph, Chief Procurement Officer. The living wage certification program, as the city manager was pointing out, tries to the only thing that we change is the actual calculation of the threshold, but the other criteria and factors still remain, and we're following exactly the same as if we were certified by the living wage for Families campaign. There is an exclusion for social enterprises. So the contracts that we award and that we consider as part of scope of within our living wage program, or now in the case of a fair wage program, would exclude social enterprises. As well, it has a threshold for small businesses. So it needs to be a business over $250,000 per year, because some of these organizations are not able to actually either pay their employees or being able to exercise being a living wage employer.
So just one follow-up to that then is what I'm hearing is that both with the fair wage program in place now and the previous living wage program, there was exclusions to that, and those are the two areas, is the social enterprise and small businesses?
That is correct.
Certain size. Okay. Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Montague.
Thanks, Chair. Just sorry, one more question through you, Chair, to the city manager, and it was something that Councillor Dominato sort of started to raise, I think, but didn't ask. And it's whether or not there's currently dedicated staff here at the City of Vancouver that are in place to ensure that the policy, the fair wage policy that's currently in place, is equitably applied throughout the city.
Thanks for the chair. So the responsibility right now is split between our supply chain team and Alex's team, who monitors our contracts, our suppliers, and then the human resources department would make sure that our internal pay rates are consistent with the fair wage policy. So there's both of those teams can manage each of those respective aspects of the program.
Okay, thanks. That's it, Chair. Thanks. Notice my clock's still ticking there, Chair.
Okay, we'll bring this meeting back to order here. I'll advance to Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much. I'm still logging on to my screen here. But I would like to move an amendment, but I was caught off guard as Councillor Kirby-Young is not here to ask questions, so bear with me for just a moment, but sure, thank you.
Okay. Okay, would you like to, I'll add you to the queue here. There you go.
Pose this, put forth this amendment to actually have a point of information in recognizing we're very limited on time in terms of how we can ask and also give everyone a chance to review this. City Manager, I wonder if you could, point of information through your chair to the City Manager, articulate the opportunities we have as a council to consider, in addition, one of the recommendations in the in-camera report that was released yesterday was a 5-year rolling average. We've talked about that, but also potentially shortening that to a 3-year rolling average, recognizing that our living wage right now is, and our fair wage policy is really that 5-year rolling average and is vulnerable because of the fluctuations in those 3 years, where living wage was actually below what our fair wage policy would have dictated. So I'm interested in having a 3-year review or a rolling average review as well, recognizing that staff are going to report back what these options are. So could you offer any comments to that?
Through the chair, certainly that's definitely something we could do, and we're happy to provide the implications of that. It would, that approach of a shorter period of time would provide a more direct relationship between the average and kind of the current state, but also would smooth that out in terms of the year-to-year fluctuation. So certainly could see some value in that, and we're happy to report back on the implications of it if that's what council asked for.
Okay, so I'm happy to introduce the amendment based on that. Thank you very much. The amendment proposed, and I believe staff will be pulling that up on our clerks will be pulling that up on the screen there, is to direct staff to explore the opportunities in challenges of using a 3-year moving average compared to the current 5-year moving average, and then report back to council Q4 of this year, so in the fall, and that an FTE staff person be designated to oversee ongoing management and implementation of fair wage policies in the city. City of Toronto has a fair wage policy and a fair wage office that ensures implementation, ongoing management. I think it's an encouraging way to go for us. And then, of course, continue city manager's engagement with living wage for families of BC in the various approaches that could be considered. And I think this is an interesting conversation to be having because it's important that larger organizations can participate in this type of a program. And as it's currently sort of moderated, if you will, and calculated, which we don't have any line of sight to per se, it really does make it incredibly complicated for an organization with 8,600 employees to participate in. And then, of course, adding an addendum overall just to ensure that the in-camera report is added to this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I need a seconder for this motion. Councillor Montague. All right, I'll advance the Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. I appreciate that this is marginally better than what we currently have, but I'm still going to speak strongly in opposition to this amendment. The 5-year rolling average fair wage is objectively worse by every measure the workers will tell you matters. It's $4 less per hour than the living wage. And a 3-year average is still going to keep us below what it actually costs to live here. It doesn't provide stability. It ensures that working people are always behind, always earning less than what they need, never able to get a break. And as we heard, the rate is unlikely to drop significantly. If it goes down a little in 1 year, great. It means we're paying slightly above the bare bones minimum of what it costs to live here, and it will make increases in future years less significant. But averaging out that cost when rents don't average out and grocery bills don't average out is not fair to workers. The average rent for a family-sized unit in Vancouver went up 52% over the last 5 years. No landlord is setting rent at the average of those last 5 years. And again, grocery costs aren't being averaged out. The cost of living is going up, and working people can't pay their bills on vibes and good intentions. We have managed these administrative changes for years. Many other municipalities have managed them for years and have continued to manage them. That is not and should not be a reason that the lowest wage workers in the city are paid less than a healthy living wage. So strongly against this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Meisner.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate Councillor Bly bringing the amendment forward. I think it strikes a good balance, and it addresses many of the challenges with this particular program, including the uncertainty that it creates, including the fluctuations of people's wages potentially going up or even down. That's just not a program that I think the city should be adopting. I really believe in our fair wage policy and taking some control over that by dedicating city resources to administering the fair wage policy as outlined in this amendment. Having a existing full-time staff person designated to the ongoing management and implementation of the fair wage policy, I think is a responsible thing to do. I would much rather see our fair wage policy administered within the city as opposed to an external organization. But I think it's great that there will be an opportunity for staff in the city manager's office to work with the external organization to express some of the challenges that we see with the program in terms of impact on collective agreements that are negotiated years in advance, and also the fluctuation issue. I just have a serious concern about people's wages going down, even if it's just a little bit. So I think this is the right way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Montague.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The concept of a living wage is great. I fully support the concept. I want people to have good, fair wages. However, what I don't support is the certification requirements of this motion. There's significant challenges, and I think this amendment addresses that. It's been pretty clear that there are significant challenges for large organizations like the City of Vancouver that have multi-year collective agreements. That's information that we've been provided by staff for a long time now. They've made it very clear to all of us. We've had several memos, we've had briefings. This is not new information. I think that's one of the reasons I'm so frustrated by it, is that we've kind of been down this path before, and here we are again. But the certification in the original motion creates what I would suggest is an unpredictable wage. It sets rates at times that would increase, and I think everyone's happy to talk about when wages go up. But one of the things people aren't talking about, it was mentioned here briefly and has been mentioned in the past, is that if the City of Vancouver were to follow the policy as prescribed, it would put the city in a position where at times workers' wages would be reduced. And that's obviously something we don't want to see. We don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair. And a decrease in the certified rate has happened before. It happened in 2016, it happened in 2017, it happened in 2019, and it'll happen again. There's no doubt to that. And to prevent that unpredictability for both the employer and the employee, a rolling average, as mentioned in this amendment, makes sense. And I'm happy to see the 3-year, the change from 5 to 3. I'm interested to see what that brings. But I think it addresses the fluctuation and dips and provides a predictable, fair wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, I won't be supporting the amendment. I appreciate that it kind of repackages a lot of this and presents it in a way that is different from the 5-year average, but I think at the end of the day, this is an avoidance of the real question about certification for a living wage. And I think it behooves us to remember that a lot of the folks who are being represented in this living wage certification are the folks who don't have the advantage of collective agreements and don't have that kind of bargaining advantage. And this is about advocacy for just decency in employment standards and rates of compensation. And I think, again, it comes back to me to this commitment that I thought we made with the Vibrant Vancouver strategy and the commitment to healthy, inclusive, and equitable, and recognizing that a lot of the folks that we're asking to do legitimate work, difficult work, work that we rely on, we don't necessarily reflect that in a living wage. And averages just aren't responsive to the reality of what folks who live and work in our city are faced with. And when they're working for us, I think that we really are obliged to kind of meet that responsibility. I don't imagine this amendment's not going to succeed, so I'm not going to spend much more time critiquing it, but for the fact that I think that this is a mistake to shift.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is a really important discussion, and I think everybody's trying to move in the same direction of ensuring that there is fair, respectful, sustainable, if I can use that word, wages for all of the folks that work in the city. And I think that the city does have a leadership role in doing that. I think for me, coming at it from an analytical perspective, the challenge that we are having is trying to mesh what is the best policy for the city of Vancouver to achieve those objectives. Given the fact that there's a real distinction, I think, between how the living wage is calculated and this unionized, typically city environment that we operate within. And so when I think about our union workers, I don't think anybody would want to go to a scenario where your wages were in flux to the same degree with the living wage and they were going up or down or adjusted annually every year. There's a reason why we do wage contracts for several years for periods of time, which is to provide that level of stability. And I think that's what the intention here is to look at the fair wage policy. These aren't easy conversations to have because you're talking about real people and you want to make sure it delivers. But I do want to know that we have something that's sustainable that accounts for the fact that we have fairly substantive benefits. I know that living wage at the City of Vancouver, I know the living wage calculation looks at that and indicates that there's adjustments and allowances made for benefits. And so that's just one example, I think, of sort of the complexities within this environment. We also have a scenario too that just like our union contracts, a lot of our third-party contracts now to ensure stability for those companies and the ability to know they have income coming in and can pay those workers and sustain those jobs are also multi-year. And so they need that level of stability. And I said, so I think we're trying to have here is how to align those pieces better together. I think it does make a lot of sense to look at a 3-year average. A 5-year is a more extended period of time. But again, I'm a data-driven type of person, so I'd like to see that analysis back and look at understanding what the implications are. And I think that's what this is looking to do here. So there's a lot of terminology. There's different models there. I think the goals are exactly the same. And we want to ensure that people are paid fairly and well to the best of our ability to do that for the really important workers and jobs that they are doing. So I think it's good that we're daylighting this conversation around the needs. I think we need to get some data and some information back to see what that looks like relative to it. And then we go from there and we determine what the best path forward is. And so I think that that's really what we're trying to do here is to find a model that the city can confidently know that we are comparable. And I don't care, honestly, whether it's called a living wage or a fair wage. What I care is that people are paid well and that we have an ongoing, sustainable, defendable methodology that people can count on. And so I think that's where we're trying to get to on this. Thanks.
Councillor Carr.
Yep, thank you. If I could ask a point of information through you to the city manager. Thank you. City Manager, I was just wanting to verify something that you said, I think, earlier, just that I got it correctly, which is when you were asked the question about City of Vancouver employees, of which you said there were estimated 8,600, that you said, I thought, about 100 to 200 are not getting a living wage. Is that?
That was the case when the policy was originally implemented. We have not done a detailed assessment of our current payroll in the context of recently concluded collective agreements, both ongoing general wage increases and one-time payments. So we would have to do that. I suspect the number would be smaller than that, but I can't give you.
All right. And in general, our collective agreements are well in excess of the living wage. Is that true or not?
The vast majority of our employees, yeah, it is a very small proportion that
Right.
that this threshold would be applicable.
Right, okay, thank you. I just want to make that very clear because it sounds to me like there's a bit of fear mongering that all of a sudden our collective agreements would all be in disarray because of going with the living wage. And that's not the case. Let's just make sure on this public record that we're all clear it is not going to affect our collective agreements. Those will stay as collective agreements, and it will affect those who are not covered by collective agreements, and that's who are most vulnerable within the city.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I'm just going to, I'd just like to close on this amendment and actually on the motion as a whole. So just recognizing my time, I believe I get to close on the motion in an additional 5 minutes. Well, I'm just hoping to close on the amendment, but I'm checking with the clerks. I can see they're providing some instruction here.
Thank you. Through the chair, the original main motion, the mover of the motion can close on that, but not for amendments. So at the moment, we're in the amendment queue. So we would need to get past the amendment queue, get into the main queue, and then we can proceed.
Oh, I see. Okay, great. Thank you very much. With that, then I'll leave it. I know we're going to go back to the other queue so we can go to a vote. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. We will take this to a vote then. Please, we're voting on the amendment. Okay, all right, so that passes with Councillors Boyle, Fry, and Carr in opposition. All right, so we'll go back to the main queue. Councillor Bly.
Oh, I'll just come off for 1 second. Thank you.
Okay. Advancing. Councillor Zhou.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I'll just make some quick comments here. So I understand this motion is to help employees' affordability issue. I really appreciate that. But I think affordability isn't just about wages. There's a whole package that matters. Employee benefit, wellness program, pension, paid personal development opportunities, extended health, RSP matching, retirement planning, and many others. City of Vancouver got all those covered. Clearly, employee satisfaction is not just about the paycheck. Many other factors also affect employee satisfaction, such as workplace culture, vacation, training opportunity, events and performance management, and many others. City of Vancouver ticks those boxes too. It is not just about a salary number. Our staff are real people. They need other programs to support their well-being. This is exactly City of Vancouver offered. So now, is there a more comprehensive program that will consider all other factors that measures the support from the employer to their employee for their affordability? Absolutely. The answer is our BC Top Employer Program, where City of Vancouver consistently on the list. The program takes into 8 different factors that impact employees' well-being. I did some research yesterday. That's the program released just 2 weeks ago. There are 125 employers on this best employer list, including some big employers such as both from private and public sectors, TELUS, BC Public Service, all the health authorities, TransLink, and of course, City of Vancouver is proud of being on the list. Out of these 125 top employers, only 3 employers, or 2%, were certified as living wage employers. Another stat, these 125 top employees in BC represent 260,000 employees. The 3 living wage certified employers on the list have 2,000 employees. Only about 0.8% of all these 260,000 employees for the top employers. So I just see some interesting here. 98% of our top employers, they aren't even living wage certified. More than 99% of their employees work with the living wage certified employers. So with that, I think the BC Top Employer Program is a better fit for larger organizations such as City of Vancouver. So yeah, in addition, I think I'm running out of time. So I think we are taking care of our staff very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bly?
Thanks very much, Chair. I just want to reiterate, this is a good conversation to have in the public forum. It helps shape the understanding of the issue, which wasn't possible while the discussion and documents needed to be in camera and have now been made public. What I'm hearing around the table is we have a shared interest, pay our city employees and contractors a fair and living wage. However, the original motion put forth wasn't actually advocating for outcomes to achieve this shared interest. Really, this motion originally put forward unamended suggested an inflexible position, I would say, that the only way to achieve a fair wage or living wage is to sign on to this campaign. So I prefer we focus on common interests rather than positions around this table and the multiple ways that we can achieve these outcomes. This is what's best for our city employees in this context and the residents across the city. Fair wages are not merely figures on a balance sheet, as we've discussed. They are a commitment to the well-being of our city staff and contractors. So currently, the vast majority of city workers exceed the 2023 living wage rate. And the stipulated living wage is the benchmark for how we execute our fair wage policy. So as we continue to navigate the complexities of building a thriving Vancouver, we remain committed to paying a fair and living wage for city workers and contractors. By directing staff to report back on the comparison between 5-year and 3-year rolling averages, we demonstrate our commitment to continuously evaluate and refine our approach to a living and fair wage. Council has also directed the implementation of a fair wage officer role within the city operations to ensure the fair and consistent application of the fair wage policy is fulfilled across city operations. We have to remember, City of Vancouver has been named top employer for BC for 2023 and 2024. Our commitment to fair wages is not just a policy, it's a testament to our values as a city, and fair wages are integral to our vision for a better Vancouver.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Boyle?
Thanks. I first also have a point of information through you, Chair, to staff, which is it's actually my understanding, and maybe staff can correct this, that the BC Top Employer Program is a program that employers pay to be on the list of. Is that true?
So there's a submission through the chair. There's a submission that employers submit. It's a third-party assessment that's done based on the information that's provided. I would have to defer. I see our Chief Human Resources Officer here in terms of if there's a cost involved in making the application. You don't pay to get on the list, though. You're selected to be on the list.
Okay, thanks for that. I will speak to the motion and amendment in closing now. The people most impacted by the city, by this council's harmful decision to end the living wage are, as we have heard, our lowest income workers, including contract workers, the folks working security contracts and the folks cleaning our public buildings, graffiti removal and traffic control, and as we heard today, library workers and other direct city staff. The report released from In-Camera yesterday stated that as of last January, approximately 240 direct employees are not paid at or above the living wage, and workers connected to 9 city contracts. All of these workers deserve to make enough to live where they work. without having to have a second or third job, without having to choose between buying groceries and paying utility bills, without needing to rely on a food bank, without being pushed out into long commutes that take away time they could be spending with their family and friends. When we consciously vote to pay people less than it costs to live here, whether it's a 5-year average or a 3-year average, less than it costs to live here, less than it costs to raise healthy kids, we are saying that we're okay with the stress that results, the lost family time, the cramped housing or long commutes that people are forced into as a result. Saying that you fully support the concept of a living wage sounds nice, but people can't pay their rent or feed their kids with that conceptual support. Again, this isn't administratively complicated. We have managed it before for many years. Other local governments manage it. And we don't have to lower people's wages. If the living wage rate goes down, we can just keep the city wage the same as we've done before. And workers would absolutely prefer to make a living wage over whatever vague concept of stability is being spun here. That stability ensures the workers are always behind. As William Asaroff said, this is a values-based decision. People who work so hard for this city, keeping our buildings clean and secure, serving food, stacking library books, and more, they all deserve the dignity and respect of a living wage. And so I will be voting in opposition to this weak amendment and in deep frustration that we continue to stand by and attempt to justify paying people who work for the city less than we know it costs to live here.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, seeing no other speakers on the queue, can we go to the voting panel, please, Clerk? Okay, that passes with Councillor Carr, Boyle, and Fry in opposition. That concludes motion 2. Can I now get a motion to adjourn the meeting standing committee? Councillor Bly and seconded by Councillor. All in favor? Very good. We will now convene in council with Mayor Sim as chair to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's committee meeting. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. We will now convene in council to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's Standing Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities meeting. Clerk, can we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor Sim is in the chair. Councillor Carr. Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Dominato. Councillor Bly. Councillor Boyle. Councillor Fry. Councillor Montague. Councillor Clausen. Councillor Meisner. Councillor Zhou.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Mayor Sim.
Thank you very much. We need a motion to adopt the Standing Committee's recommendations for reports 1 through 6 and council members' motions 1 and 2. Councillor Kirby-Young, seconded by Councillor Zhou. All those in favor say yay. Yay. All those opposed say nay. Great. The motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to move a motion to adjourn the meeting? Great. Councillor Meisner, seconded by Councillor Kirby-Young. All those in favor say yay. Yay. All those opposed say nay. Great. The motion carries unanimously. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.